Everyone, in this last video, I will attempt to tie together some of the major events of the later part of Western civilization. Now, while I know these videos probably don't help too much with your exams and quizzes, which go into, I know, a lot of depth in the readings, what I'm really hoping to do here, what I've hoped to do with a few of these other videos, is just try to tie some of this together and maybe summarize some of the real big pieces. So hopefully I've been able to do that for you, and hopefully you can walk away feeling a little bit more connected to the overall story of Western civilization. Now, as I've said from the beginning, Western civilization in 6 weeks is a real challenge, as you are all seeing in this course. And I know this has been a tough course, and I commend everybody for their hard work. But yeah, it's tough in 6 weeks. It's tough in 16 weeks. It's not uncommon for Western civilization courses to be divided into two courses. One course up until like 1500, and a second course from 1500 onwards. And there's a real reason for that, because really, if you're going through the readings and you're seeing what's going on, there's really a definite change in things around 1500, either from the Renaissance or the Reformation period forward. It really kind of marks a distinct change in Western civilization, and it's a real change. It's not just that things get more complicated, but that is one aspect as well. As we start to read and go forward, things have become more complicated. It's not just one empire in Rome. It's 15 different countries now, and there's all kinds of religious and economic and political things that are happening. So it does become much more complex to study Western civilization the later we get. So in this last video, I'm going to kind of quickly try to wrap up a few major areas, and of course that really won't do them justice, as these are major topics that you can spend a lifetime really learning. So I will hopefully try to tie some of these areas together for us. Okay, I do want to take a minute to discuss what we call modernity, or the modern era. While it's up for debate, a lot of historians generally pinpoint the start of the modern era around the time of the Renaissance, maybe through the Enlightenment, so which is a fairly large period of time, but just the idea that there's a definite shift in the way that we kind of go about things, so to speak. Now, I know it seems odd to refer to 500 years ago as the modern era, but modernity really refers to a period marked by several things. It marks a questioning or rejection of tradition. Things such as individualism, freedom, and formal equality become key priorities for people. So this is much different from before then. Modernity is also marked by the scientific and technological revolutions that come about. And with that progress in economics, and we moved away from an agrarian society towards capitalism and the free market economy. So all these things are happening around that time period of the Enlightenment, and greatly just changed the whole fabric of Western civilization. These things also spurred the rise of industrialization and urbanization, and with that, secularization as well. So as we start to see, as we move forward in time, the influence of the church becomes less. When we were studying the Middle Ages, and the kind of later Middle Ages, the church was highly influential. But as we get further into history here, we will see the rise, kind of the fall of influence of the church, and the rise of the nation state, so to speak. So not just the countries, we've had empires, but now nations, and the idea of nationalism is going to become a big part of Western civilization forward. It also marks the end of the absolute monarch states. This is where you're seeing, the United Kingdom becoming a parliamentary system. The United States, of course, is a democracy. So this area of the 1700s and the 1800s sees the fall of monarchs and the rise of democratic states, so to speak. All these things, all these aspects of the modern era of modernity sort of come to a head at the start of one of the first great wars of the 20th century, and of course I mean World War One. So things like industrialization and urbanization and the rise of the nation state and this surge in nationalism, these all kind of culminate in the start of World War One, and I'll talk about that in just a second. Now this last weekend I had the opportunity to see a new superhero movie, the Wonder Woman movie, which I recommend. It's very good. But now this is in no way a historically accurate film, although it does take place in World War One, and I enjoyed the setting because World War One is really a clash of worlds, so to speak. It kind of signifies the end of the New World and the beginning of the New World. It's kind of the old world meeting the New World, and really the end of World War One will be another dramatic shift in society. But also the message in Wonder Woman, and I'm not going to give away too much of the film, but it was the idea that World War One represented the first time in history where mankind had developed enough technology to basically eliminate itself. That technology had advanced to the point where this war would be different from all other wars in the level of technology used, which of course seems rudimentary to us now, but at the time it was so much more technologically advanced than before. And this really represented the first time mankind had this type of power to almost destroy itself. In the movie, it also brings in some Greek influences as well, because one of the main protagonists is the god of war from Greek mythology, Ares, and of course he's been influencing man to stay at war with each other. But World War One is an interesting war in the fact that the United States plays a very small role in this war. Interestingly, when we were leaving the theater, my son told me that, I haven't heard a whole lot about World War One. I don't feel like we talked about it much in school, and I think there's a reason for that, because the United States really played a very small but decisive role in World War One. So I'm going to talk just a little bit about World War One and how World War One really sets the stage for this latter part of Western civilization here in this last week of class. So I'll summarize World War One in about 3 minutes. But okay, so World War One is really spearheaded and started by the rise in nationalism in the nation state in the late 1800s and early 1900s, which led to an intense allying with other nations. So it was one nation telling another nation, if you're attacked, we will come to your protection. And another nation say, well, if you're attacked, we'll come to your protection. So this huge alliance of several nations form, which doesn't seem like a problem until one seemingly meaningless assassination occurs, which sets off this whole series of alliances coming to fight each other. So the assassination was the Archduke Francis Ferdinand of Austria. Him and his wife were assassinated in Serbia, and because of this, not meaningless, I mean everybody's life has meaning, but this rather insignificant figure being assassinated, Austria declares war on Serbia. And because of that, all these other people that are allied with both Austria and Serbia come to each other's aid, and from that point forward, we have a global size war happening. Initially, soldiers were excited and proud to go off and fight for their country. So this is one of the first times in history where people are now proud of their country. They're proud to be a German. They're proud to be French, whereas before they were just kind of, throughout history, people were just kind of forced to fight. But now they had this sense of pride in their country. But when soldiers got to the war and to the front, they quickly realized that this was unlike other wars. Warfare had changed drastically since the last wars were fought in Europe, and both sides basically dug in for an intense and costly 4-year war. Interestingly, the war started with military generals riding on horseback, and they were still in their full decorative pomp and circumstance. So it kind of still had that look of old school wars, but it would end with the first uses of tanks and planes and submarines. So it's really, the war starts with like the old world and ends with the new world, so to speak. Who exactly is fighting in this war? On one side, you have what's known as the Triple Alliance, which is France, Britain, or the British Empire, in Russia. Now, the United States would join the side of the Allies, but really not until the last year and a half of the war, so not till 1917. On the other side, you have what's known as the Central Powers, which is basically Germany, or the German Empire, the Austrian-Hungary Empire, and the Ottoman Empire. Interesting note that this is really the last time in history we will hear the name the Ottoman Empire. So this is kind of their last stand, so to speak. Okay, so of course the U.S. doesn't join until 1917, and around that time, this is also when Russia actually leaves the war, because another key event in Western civilization is happening at home in Russia, and this is, of course, the Communist Revolution is happening, which is just a major turning point in Russia, and ends with the Soviet Union. So that's happening kind of at the same time World War I is ending. So all in all, the war is fought by almost 70 million military personnel, the largest war by numbers of people fought ever, and over 9 million soldiers will die in the war, and another 7 million civilians will be dead. So almost 16 million people in Europe are dead at the end of this war, and this is really largely attributed to the new and increased levels of technology that both sides are using. They can just really speed up the killing much faster, and then also the really horrible form of warfare that's seen in this war, that trench warfare, where both sides really dug into these miles and miles of trenches, and really would advance an inch or two, every day or every week, and it was years spent in these horrible trenches, and in the area known as no man's land in the middle, and it was just really a very sad and horrific war. But the end of the war marks some key changes politically throughout Europe. It spearheads more political revolutions, and it also, the end of the war, sees the first time where we see a global sort of coming together in the League of Nations, which was the idea of U.S. President Woodrow Wilson, where we actually wouldn't even join the League of Nations, but this is kind of the precursor to the United Nations today. So World War I really represented kind of a turning point in Western civilization, and really, literally, will lead almost directly up to the start of the Second World War. So